You learn a lot from somebody when you sit down and have like an open, honest conversation. And that's the goal behind using your podcasts, right?
Well, hey, welcome back to the Amanda Kaufman Show. And today I am joined by Brooke Trometer. She is the founder and CEO of Cypress Media Productions, a concierge-style podcast strategy and production agency. She helps experts, founders, and high-ticket professionals design and launch client-landing podcasts that get them paid and positioned well in the marketplace. Then handles all the post-production to make them look like $1 million. Love that. Through her signature mic to money method, Brooke transforms podcasts from passion projects to revenue-driving marketing assets that attract clients, collaborations, and credibility. She's worked with attorneys, consultants, and entrepreneurs across the country to turn their message into a magnet for business growth. Known for her mix of strategy and authenticity, Brooke believes the best marketing starts with real conversations that build trust and connection. Couldn't agree more. And Brooke, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So good. Well, I was so stoked to see you join us here on the show because I've had a lot of questions about, Amanda, how do you do the podcast? How, you've got your podcast process and everything. Please feel free to judge me on the air of like anything I'm doing wrong. But I get asked all the time, and it's not that's not my core business, is to set people's podcasts up. So then when I saw, that you wanted to talk about this, I was like, yes, we're going to answer some questions today.
Love it. Well, you throw them out here. Let's go.
Well, I noticed even in your introduction, you made this great distinction between a hobby podcast and something that's like a monetizable, marketable asset. And something that I've noticed in working with so many coaches over the years is that there is a lot of misinformation and understanding around what it takes to monetize through marketing. They often say post more, or they say just start a podcast or write a book. And, there's this casualness to well, because it's so easy to hit publish, or it's so easy to do that that's the whole picture. But I'm guessing you have a slightly different perspective there.
Yeah, so a lot of people do. And I think that's probably the hardest part for me when it comes to me even getting clients, is because people have such a misconception about what a podcast can do and how it's used. And like the hobby ones, like we were talking about, or like you were just talking about, people kind of like you said, they're told, start a podcast, write a book, make a course, do it, whatever. But having a podcast, people view it as like the goal to it is to build a big audience. And that is probably, to me, going into building a podcast for marketing and driving that ROI. If you're going into it building one that the plan is just you're going to have this massive audience, and then your audience is going to want to buy from you, is going to want to look at you as the guru, all of that, that's going to be the fastest way that you're going to end up with burnout. And you're going to turn around and say, well, podcasting just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Building a big audience organically doesn't happen unless you just happen to be under that blessed star of that you just started it hit the right algorithm, and bam, it went off. But that does not happen typically, right? So when you're looking at it as, say, somebody who's a coach, an attorney, or whatever, their goal behind the podcast is not to build a large audience. It's about being very strategic about the guests that you're bringing on. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
When you have to have a clear idea of who your ideal clients are, who your ideal strategic partners are, and drop the ego and figure out who is above you, who has more authority in your industry than you do. And when you know what those three things are, you can really start to boost and utilize that podcast in a way that's going to grow the ROI. Because one of the hardest things, I think, with sales is trying to reach out in those cold emails, cold direct messages, and be able to get people to just want to let you come and talk to them about how you can sell whatever it is that you're trying to sell, right? And when you have a podcast, if you instead identify and pick those people that you want to work with, that you want to do business with, and that you want to be associated with, you go into those DMs or with those emails and you start asking, hey, would you care to be on my podcast? I saw you had this book that was coming out. I want to let you talk about that. I want to, and about how your podcast is beneficial for them. And they come on, you're going to get way more yeses for that than you are for a sales call. Now, the easiest sales to make, though, are ones that are already warm leads, right? So once we have organic, authentic conversations on a podcast, we're going to be way more friendly with each other now. You're going to have that warm connection for when you're done with the podcast to come on and then say, hey, I know, you've got this going on and I kind of do this particular thing, whatever it is that you do, now could I sit there and help you see, kind of design what this would look like and how this could work for your company or for what you're doing? But you're doing this after presenting them with the episode, shorts, things that they can clip. You're making that whole podcast and that whole first interaction about them and helping them. And then that is what builds that relationship to be able to, in turn, within a couple of weeks, be able to say, okay, hey, here's some things that I think I could help you with. Would you be open to having that conversation with me? And you're going to get far more yeses because they already trust you to come on and start having a conversation with you about that. And that's when you start seeing the ROI drive go up.
I see. Yeah. So one of my favorite little reminders is the best way to show people that you can help people is by genuinely helping them.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And so I've personally really loved doing a interview style podcast because it does open up a whole different level of willingness to network and connect because you're creating something together, and it's a relatively mutually lower risk thing to build together and just see where it lands, see where the chemistry is. And it's a great way to showcase how you show up professionally.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of compliments on the Amanda Kaufman Show simply because we're really organized. Right? Like we have a high level of organization, and that's actually a more rare professional trait than it should be.
Yeah,
but it does give you like that big leg up without the pressure of a sale, to your point. Mm-hmm. Now, I've also had this experience, and I'm so curious about your perspective on it. I've had the experience of somebody inviting me onto the podcast, and then immediately it was very high pressure sale.
Absolutely.
So and it's gross, right? Like, and that was something that I was like actually very nervous about having a podcast for a while. Cause like I wanted my intent to be well understood as much as possible. Mm-hmm. And yes, I have made money from having conversations with the right people after the podcast, just like you described. But I wonder if you could just like walk us through, maybe some of the no-nos, the don'ts when you are taking this approach, and the do's to maximize the likelihood that it's going to be a mutually beneficial connection later.
Yeah. So you're right. A lot of people, and I've heard people say that too, when I've been talking to them about building these podcasts like this and using it in this way. And they're like, well, I was on a podcast just the same as what you were saying. And as soon as I got in there, it instantly, within 10 minutes turned into this like sales call, and that is the most disingenuous way to use a podcast, in my opinion. And it's gross. But what you are teaching people, now I will tell you this as somebody goes into it, if they're doing that on the podcast and they have brought you in under the pretense of, hey, let's just talk about, you, or let's talk about this topic or whatever it is. And then they kind of do a bait and switch with you. I'm going to assume when I'm on that podcast that that's how they do business.
That's a fair assumption.
Yep, exactly. I'm going to assume that's how you do business. You told me we were coming on for this, this conversation, and then you've just essentially you lied about your intentions, right? You lied about what this was going to be. And I got brought in under false pretenses. So that to me is the fastest way to lose the trust and break relationships, is when you use the podcast that way, because that's not what you invited them on for. Now, am I inviting somebody on because I'm wanting to do business with them? Yeah, pretty much. A lot of times that is what I'm bringing them on for, most of the time, right? And that's what I'm training my people to do as well. But you have to be honest with the intention of like, okay, I'm bringing them on because I want to build the relationship and build that trust so that I can work with them later, not in this moment. I didn't bring them on for a sales call, so I can't have a sales call with them. Authenticity is so important during these interviews, and being who you put yourself out to be on the podcast is going to be reflected on the clients that come in from that, or the people that you do business with that want to do business with you. You're going to draw what you put out, right? So being authentic on there is the biggest thing. You don't want to bring in clients that you don't want to work with, right? You don't want to draw those people to you. So yeah, be who you are on the podcast as well, because you're going to attract the people that you really want to work with, and it's going to naturally repel the people that you don't, right? Then, and then the follow-up afterwards, that is where you're going to start having your conversations about business. After the podcast is over with, you've been able to pick up tidbits of information and things about their business, put together how they think, how, they view the world, what their value systems are. And then that's what you're going to use later to come back and say, hey, maybe I could help you with this thing. And now the next conversation you're inviting them to is genuinely, hey, I want to talk to you about business. I want to talk to you about what we can do here. And they have the ability to accept that business call, that sales call at that point, or not to. And if they do, you can have an honest business conversation with them, because that is what you invited, that's what you set up for that second call. So it's always about being honest.
I think that's so true. And, like the perspective I took was, I think there are a lot of business relationships that you have to build to have a really successful business. And I actually first thought about networking in this way when I was a consultant. And basically I had a manager who said to me, Amanda, you do such a good job of managing up, right? Like you're so good at keeping your bosses happy, you get the mentorship and all this kind of thing, but you got to remember, Amanda, that you've got to network up, down, and sideways. And I was like, what the hell are you talking about? And he explained it to me. He was like, take what you're learning and mentor people, take what you're doing and like pull people up and along with you, but also make sure you're taking care of those peers and those colleagues. And that advice just stuck with me. Like it's probably been close to 20 years since I first heard that idea, but that was very much the attitude that I bring to particularly the podcast marketing channel. There's other marketing channels where I'm like, okay, I will help you. You're the client. And I'm, it's kind of more of that down, not looking down at my prospects, but rather it's like, I very much have authority positioning here to give you a solution that you're looking for.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
But the podcast I find is better for me anyway, for generally the colleagues, right? Like the people who are peers to be of service to each other. And then, what I've built, because I think in framework too, is like, okay, it could be a referral source. I might buy from this person.
Right.
I might sell to this person. I might just like this person.
Yeah.
This is just a champion and somebody that's like cool. And there's nothing really here yet in a business context, but like we got to know each other. And like, I've had relationships like that where 2.5 years later, 3 years later, 5 years later, pop, there's an opportunity, right? And it comes from the connection. And then there's the fifth possibility, and the fifth possibility is like, not for me, not anymore. Right. And like that, like, if you let that be okay for your more organic marketing strategies, you end up making so much more because you can be trusted.
Yeah, absolutely. And using it like this, it's really a good way. It almost auto filters the people that you want to do business with, or the people you want to be associated with, because you learn a lot from somebody when you sit down and have like an open, honest conversation. And that's the goal behind using your podcasts, right? It's to have those open, honest relationships or conversations. And you're going to find out so much. Do you want to be associated with this person? Are they what you thought they were before you brought them on?
Yeah.
Yeah. And like you said, networking up, down, sideways, and, all of the other, that's another thing with these podcasts too. You're going to bring people on that are kind of your peer. That could be an amazing strategic partnership to have. I have one person, one of the attorneys that I work with, he's a marital law attorney. He can't know who his ideal client is going to be because nobody knows they need a family law attorney until they need a family law attorney, right? You can't just pinpoint that. So, what he does, he has decided his entire podcast is all about the county that he lives in and everything they have going on. So he brings on business owners, nonprofit people, that are working and seeing what their projects are. He brings on the elected officials to talk about what they've got going on. I mean, he really just dives in and makes that whole podcast about his community. And because he's done that and he brings these people on and talks about them, he stays top of mind, right?
Brilliant.
Yeah, he stays top of mind, and he has done so well with it that he was telling me that he wanted to brainstorm some stuff with me, and he's like, it's done so well. He's like, I'm expanding my practice into the neighboring counties. Like, I think I want to start a second podcast about that county and do the same thing.
It's a great strategy. I think a lot of times with marketing, people think like, I know I was definitely brought up on direct response. And when you're very first starting out, like having a direct, do you want it? Yeah. Yes, you do. Amazing. And it's a little like, I think about the duckling on the farm that's like going to all the different animals and going, are you my mother? Are you my mother? And they're just like looking, and eventually they run into the duck's mother. But, I think that there's a time and a place for that in your business. And I think of a podcast as being a slightly more mature strategy. Like you're definitely in it, to win it. You're patient. This is an augmentation of a foundation. I have a curiosity for you, which is, when I talk to people about the possibility of podcast as a strategy for them, you can go the route of hiring an agency like you, but you can also go the route of doing it yourself like me, right?
Yep.
And I'm curious, in your professional position, you do talk to a lot of people about podcast strategy. When is it better to go for it on your own? And when is it better to allow someone like you to do it, that the ROI is likely?
Yeah. I think that somebody who has, if you have a high ticket offer, if you have, even if it's like a mid-range ticket, but it's a reoccurring, like if the lifetime value of your client is going to be equivalent to a high ticket, to a high ticket sale, this is probably when you want to start bringing an agency in for you. Because first off, usually if you're doing something high ticket, a lot of times it's much more of a kind of like high touch relationship between you and your client, high touch point there. That means that requires more of you for that. So the ability for you to use a podcast to land clients like this and have the time to edit, pull social media, post it, doing things like that, you don't have as much time. So unless you're just naturally great at like being able to work, the editing softwares and, doing all of that. I think, and then it becomes time where it's like, you're going to want an agency to do it for you. You can hire people from Fiverr. You can hire people, to do your thumbnails, to do your video edits, things like that. But then you're also playing like the person that's juggling all of them too, right? You're having to talk and communicate with like 5 different people possibly. And people also look at like, what is the cost of doing that? Well, when you go on to Fiverr or something, a lot of times you'll see them, oh, hey, we'll edit this episode for $150. But then when you go in there, you realize it's for a 15-minute episode or less. If you're somebody that is doing 30 minutes or an hour, long conversations like that, well, that's not going to really make sense for you, because then they start creeping up on the cost, right? Because the length of time to edit it is more. And now you're upwards of sometimes the mid 200s. And that's just for the editing. Then you've got to sit there and still pull your social media. AI can do that, but AI doesn't do great, in my opinion, of picking the topics people care about. I was on a podcast not that long ago, and the shorts and stuff that I got sent back, like I could tell it was AI that picked it, because one of them that came back, like, came in the middle of me telling where I lived and my family dynamic, and cut off in the middle of it. And I'm like, that's not
that is some bad AI, right? Like that, I agree with you. I think like a human oversight and input. And I think the other thing too is like, do you already have the background on selecting strategy for market position and all that kind of thing? Like if you can waste a huge amount of time building something that doesn't actually build your business if you don't work with an expert. And if you can afford to work with the expert, work with the expert.
Yeah.
You know, if you're kind of dabbling and you're like, I don't know if I really want to do this, you know, just be aware, right? That a lot of people are saying like, oh, just do it on AI. You can do it yourself. It's like, I have an internal team that's supporting me, and I've been doing this marketing of a coaching business thing for over 8 years and consulting on marketing strategy specifically. So when I DIY something, it's a very different picture than somebody who has, you know, like the lawyer example was just such a good one. You know, he's an expert at being a lawyer, right? So where do you want to put your energy and your expertise, right?
Right. And if you have something like what you're talking about, where you already have marketing experience and you already have like a team with you that is also their expertise, then it makes sense to keep it in-house, right? But if you're somebody out there and that's not the expertise, like you said, the lawyer, or I have people that have been like financial wealth advisors and consultants and
another good one,
like that, they are not the person that is going to have an internal team that is going to be able to take that kind of production over. And if a lot of times, if they hire a team to come in because it's solely for the podcast at that point, it could potentially cost them more than it would to hire an agency out like ours to be able to do that. And, you know, you want to make sure that that makes sense, that you're not spending more than you have to, but that you're also getting people in that know what they're doing, you know, and know how to make this work for you.
I love this. Well, Brooke, what's the best way for people to follow you?
Yeah, so the best way to follow me is going to be on Facebook, because that's where I spend most of my time. So yeah, you can just find me, Brooke Trometer, on Facebook. And yeah, I have LinkedIn as well, but you know, Facebook's best.
Love it. Well, dear listener, we'll make sure that we have all of Brooke's links in the show notes below, so you can follow her wherever you like to spend time. And thank you so much for being here, Brooke, and just giving us the real deal on building a profitable product.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
My absolute pleasure. And dear listener, if this was helpful for you, if you've got a friend who has been thinking about starting a podcast and they're not sure what direction to go, grab the link to this episode wherever you happen to be listening to it, send it to them on text or on email, and just let them know that, you know, a few minutes of this episode might just clear some things up for them. And hey, if you've been following along, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss a future episode. And finally, if you're really loving what we do, one of the most generous things you can do is leave an honest review, because when people organically come across the podcast, they're weighing and deciding whether they want to spend time with us. And if you think that that would be a great idea, a review goes a super long way. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode, and we'll be back very, very soon with another one. And until then, make sure you do what matters.